just going to talk a little bit about my memoir, which is coming out November 9th, and thank you very much, Elizabeth, for publishing my book. It means a lot to me. It was an interesting journey. It took me 4 years to get here. Along the way, I unpacked a lot of my own trauma, and that's both intergenerational trauma and childhood trauma. Put me in therapy, and I'm doing better now. And the memoir is called Out from the Shadows, and it will be coming out November 9th. And it tells the story of my family's history and life growing up with Holocaust survivor parents. But as I was coming out of that process and getting better, I decided that there were other people just like me, and that many, many descendants of Holocaust survivors never speak about their stories, never get a chance. They don't even talk to each other. And I decided I was going to do another book. And my book does talk about intergenerational trauma, but I decided I was going to reach out to the community and be a conduit for them and tell their stories. And so the next book I'm writing, and I'm in the course of writing it right now, is on intergenerational trauma, and it's called The Hidden Victims. And it's going to describe the impacts of trauma on descendants of Holocaust survivors, both second generation and third generation. Over the past 7 months, I've been interviewing descendants and recording them. Right now, I'm at 77 interviews, and we'll be continuing this into the fall. And what I plan to do is, there are a lot of books, I think clinical books about intergenerational trauma. What I plan to do is do a book for laymen and for descendants like us and others out there. And the book will provide common threads throughout this community. So far, I can tell you some of the demographics. 80% of the participants have been second generation. 75% are American, but I have interviewed people from around the world, including Israel, Australia, South America, Europe. 70% are women, because guess what? Men don't like to talk about these things. And the age ranges have been from 22 to 78. And I can tell you some of the observations that I've made so far, and some of them will be very familiar to you. One thing is that participants, they experience a lot of different kinds of trauma. And because they live in our society, and it's hard to separate them all. So some people, so on top of intergenerational trauma, people might have been subject to physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and you can't really separate them out, which has made it a bit of a challenge. Many survivors did not speak about their experiences. Some did. And either they wanted to shield their children from these painful stories, or they just wanted to bury those memories themselves. And what I discovered was that where children didn't know their parents' stories, it triggered a lifelong pursuit to find out. And I'm one of those as well. Some survivors were actually too open and traumatized their own children. Childhood survivors incurred additional trauma because what I found was their educational and social development was frozen in time. So if you were a 12-year-old and you were hidden, or you were in a camp, you remained, in some cases, emotionally a 12-year-old. And also, if you were separated from your parents at a young age, you don't have the opportunity to develop parental skills. And that really, really impacted on the next generation. People describe their parents as being very loving, sometimes smothering, but also distant and uninvolved. Some survivors, and my father was one, who lost their entire family. So, they had children and a spouse, and quickly matched themselves up with someone else after liberation and created a new family. But when you learn that you are a replacement family, it just creates an additional burden. Children reported that they often felt a lot of pressure to protect their parents because they'd already experienced a lot of pain, which is a bit of a role reversal. And there was always this pressure about being the good child. Though a lot of people, several people did tell me that it just caused them to be rebellious. Descendants can have very rocky relationships with their spouses and children. And I was surprised to hear that quite a number of women escaped what they called oppressive homes and got married very young, and those all end up being very short-lived dysfunctional marriages. And at the end of the interviews, we always talked about October 7th. And I can tell you that everybody was traumatized by the attack. And almost everyone commented they were sure glad their parents were alive to see what had happened. So anyways, I'm really looking forward to really start writing this book, and I think there'll be a lot of interest in it going forward. Thank you.